My stepmom called the police on me for threatening her children because I refused to babysit them for free, even though I explained I was drowning in exams and exhausted from working double shifts. She mocked me, saying, "Cry me a river." I stayed silent then, but last week she spotted me in a store parking lot and drove away without a word. For years I believed I had the most incredible parents anyone could ask for. They found me at 6 months old, abandoned in a public bathroom, just a tiny baby wrapped in a blanket. They were only 18, living at home, and they fought their own parents tooth and nail to take me in. For over a decade they were my whole world, the most amazing people I'd ever met. But then on my 12th birthday, my entire life shattered into a million pieces. Social workers showed up at our door, and they started asking these random, horrifying questions about my foster dad touching me, laying hands on me. No matter how many times I screamed, "No!" they just refused to let up. They told me I was lying. At one point they flat out said I was a victim of assault, and the sooner I admitted it, the better. I remember one of the male workers grabbing my wrist so hard it made me whimper, and my dad, bless him, he lunged at the guy. Of course, they took that as a sign of him being violent, and before I knew it, I was being stuffed into their car, driven away from everything I knew. We drove for over 3 agonizing hours. My heart was pounding the whole time, my stomach in knots. We finally pulled up to this massive, cold-looking house. My new fosters, Peter and Jess, greeted me. They looked mean, genuinely cold. The first thing they did, wiped my phone clean. Just like that, all my contacts, all my photos, everything gone. They showed me to my room, which was right next to their biological daughter Sophia's nursery. Sophia was 4 and she had really bad asthma. "Family helps family," Jess said, her voice devoid of warmth. "You're older, so you'll be helping with Sophia." Then she handed me her medicine schedule and showed me how to use her nebulizer. That night, they dragged me to some country club gala. The designer clothes they dressed me in gave my skin this horrible allergic reaction, but they just wrapped the rashes in Band-Aids and called it good. At the gala, they paraded me around like some trophy, telling everyone I was the poor foster child they'd saved from an abusive, neglectful home. When people asked about the bandages, they'd sympathetically nod and say, "Oh, that was her old foster parents doing." The next morning, I dared to ask if I could just be driven back to my old home, just to get my things. Jess slapped me hard. "Say their name one more time," she hissed. "I'll make it worse." The next week I started school. It was private, expensive, and the kids seemed nice, but I couldn't be friends with them. Peter and Jess had taken my phone, just in case I tried to contact my real parents. And after school, every single day I had to take care of Sophia. I begged them, practically on my knees, to let me join the chess club. It was during lunch, not even after school. But Peter and Jess just flat out said no because chess wasn't for girls. But the thing that really made my stomach churn, that made me feel sick to my core, was when Peter had his business friends over. They'd be playing poker and Peter would make me wear this specific outfit. A short pleated skirt with knee-high socks, and a white shirt that was just too small. I had to serve drinks and snacks while they just stared at me, making comments about how I was growing up so pretty. One day, I overheard some kids at school talking about the state orchestra championships. My foster brother Joe, his school was competing, and they always performed at the downtown pavilion. My heart literally raced. This was it. Maybe I could see him. Maybe I could even talk to him and have him get me back to my parents. I tried to bring it up casually at dinner, like it was just something fun to do downtown, but Jess's face went absolutely cold. She said they were going to Aspen that week, and I needed to stay home with Sophia. When I told them I was scared to sleep alone in the house, Peter just smiled. That terrifying, predatory smile. He said everything would be fine, because his poker friends would be staying the nights. My stomach dropped. I knew exactly what that meant. That week was a living hell. Sophia needed breathing treatments every 4 hours, and those men, Peter's poker friends, they insisted on sleeping in the same bed with me. They'd press themselves against me, their hands on my waist, whispering how long they'd waited for this. On day 4, while the house was empty, I saw my chance. I grabbed Sophia's iPad and started searching Facebook. I found my parents, created an account, and sent them a desperate message. I told them everything. Sophia's medicine schedule, the friends who came over, everything. I begged them to help me. They responded within an hour, saying they hadn't stopped fighting for me, and that they were gathering lawyers. They promised we'd reunite, and for 3 precious days I had hope. But then Peter and Jess came back early. At dinner, Peter looked me up and down, a chilling glint in his eye, before taking out Sophia's iPad. He stared right at me and casually mentioned finding something interesting. My heart plummeted. I tried to play dumb, but Peter grabbed me by my hair, dragging me upstairs. He locked me in the closet for the next 12 hours without food or water. I woke up the next morning to strange wiring sounds. The closet door finally opened, and when Peter dragged me out, I saw them. Brand new cameras installed in every single corner of the house. Even my shower. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, Jess sneered. Oh, and one more thing, she added, shoving her iPad in my face. It was an article published that very morning. Foster parents who had child taken away, arrested for child sexual assault. Jess had this sick, twisted smirk on her face. How will you go to them now? She taunted. Go on, text them again. I'm sure they'll respond from prison. I just looked at them, tears streaming down my face, but they didn't care. For hours later, I was being dragged to another charity event, forced to listen to Peter and Jess badmouth my parents, their lies flowing freely. That night, something snapped inside me. I realized if nobody could save me, I had to save myself. I waited until they were asleep and I ran. I made it to the police station, still in my pajamas, my heart hammering against my ribs. I ran to the first officer I saw and just started rambling, pouring out everything. At first, the officer looked horrified, truly shocked, until he heard me mention Jess and Peter's names. His face changed immediately. He excused himself to make some calls, and 20 minutes later, Peter and Jess were walking through the front door. The chief shook Peter's hand like old friends as they explained this was all a misunderstanding, from a hormonal, anxious teenager. No amount of explaining, no amount of begging changed anything. Before I knew it, I was back in the car with Peter and Jess. You're screwed now, Peter turned to me, his voice a low, venomous growl. If you thought before was bad, just wait. The car ride back was silent, except for Sophia's faint wheezing from her car seat. I pressed my face against the window, watching the police station disappear behind us. My stomach churned as Peter's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Back at the house, Peter yanked me from the car while Jess carried Sophia inside. He dragged me straight to the living room where new cameras blinked red from every corner. The house felt different now, like a prison with electronic eyes. Peter shoved me onto the couch and paced in front of me, his face purple with rage. He grabbed a notepad from the coffee table and started writing furiously. When he finished, he thrust it at me. New rules. No leaving the house without them. No speaking to anyone at school except teachers. No using any electronics. No entering their bedroom or office. No going near windows after dark. Jess, who had just returned from putting Sophia to bed, studied the list. She added more rules. Wake up at 5 a.m. for chores. Prepare all meals. Clean the entire house daily. Care for Sophia during all her treatments. Sleep only between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. She underlined the last one twice. They made me sign the paper. Peter filed it in a folder labeled with my name, already thick with documents. He locked it in his office desk drawer, making sure I watched. The next morning, the new routine began. My alarm shrieked at 5 a.m. I stumbled to the kitchen and started breakfast. Fried eggs for Peter, exactly over medium. Toast for Jess, light brown only. Sophia's special allergy-free oatmeal. I moved like a robot, trying not to think about my real parents in jail. Peter appeared at 6 a.m. sharp, inspecting my work. The eggs were slightly runny. He dumped the entire plate in the trash and made me start over. This time I cooked them perfectly. He ate in silence while reading his tablet, occasionally glancing at the camera feed displayed on the screen. School became my only escape, but even that was limited. Peter drove me there himself now, walking me to the entrance. He spoke with the principal privately while I waited outside. When they emerged, the principal gave me a strange, knowing look. Peter had clearly said something to ensure I stayed isolated. In class, kids tried talking to me, but I kept my head down. During lunch, I sat alone in the library, pretending to read while my stomach growled. Peter and Jess had stopped packing me lunch as punishment. The librarian noticed and offered me crackers from her desk. I wanted to tell her everything, but the image of those cameras stopped me cold. They'd know somehow. After school, Peter was always waiting. We'd drive straight home where Sophia needed her 4 p.m. breathing treatment. I administered the medicine while Jess watched, criticizing my technique. Sophia would cry, reaching for her mom, but Jess never comforted her. That was my job now. Evenings were for cleaning. Every surface had to shine. Peter would run his finger along shelves, checking for dust. Any speck meant starting the entire room over. My hands grew raw from the cleaning chemicals. Jess noticed and bought cheaper ones that burned worse. The cameras were everywhere. In my bedroom, they could see everything except inside the closet. In the bathroom, one faced the shower. I learned to change clothes under a towel, moving awkwardly to maintain any sliver of privacy. Even then, I felt exposed. Peter's poker nights resumed that Friday. He laid out the outfit on my bed. The skirt was shorter than before, the shirt tighter. I changed in the closet, my hands shaking. When I emerged, Peter was waiting. He adjusted my collar, his fingers lingering on my neck. His friends arrived at 8 p.m. The same group as always, plus 2 new faces. They settled around the poker table while I served drinks. One man grabbed my wrist as I poured his whiskey, pulling me closer. Peter watched but said nothing. Another ran his hand along my back as I cleared empty glasses. My skin crawled. At midnight, they finally left. Peter counted his winnings while I cleaned up. He pocketed the cash and headed upstairs without a word. I scrubbed the glasses until my fingers pruned, trying to wash away the feeling of their hands. Saturday meant charity events. Jess selected my outfit, a modest dress that still, somehow, hid the fresh bruises on my arms. At the country club, they introduced me to everyone as their troubled foster child, whom they were heroically saving. People cooed sympathetically while I stood silent, a prop in their twisted play. One woman asked about my previous foster parents. Jess launched into a rehearsed story about neglect and abuse, adding details that made my stomach turn. She claimed they'd locked me in closets, denied me food, forced me to sleep on floors. Everything Peter and Jess actually did was projected onto my real parents. During the luncheon, I excused myself to use the bathroom. In the hallway, I passed a payphone. My heart raced. I could call someone. Anyone. But who? My parents were in jail. I didn't know any other numbers by heart, and the security camera in the corner blinked steadily, a silent observer. Back at the table, Peter's expression told me he'd noticed my absence. He gripped my shoulder, fingers digging deep. The message was clear. After the event, he made me sit in the car while he and Jess mingled for another hour. The windows were cracked just enough to prevent suffocation. Sunday brought a new horror. Peter installed cameras in the closet, eliminating my last private space. He also added locks to the windows and a security system that beeped whenever doors opened. The house became a high-tech cage. That night, Sophia had a severe asthma attack. Her breathing treatments weren't working. Jess blamed me for administering them wrong, though I'd followed the instructions perfectly. They rushed her to the hospital while I stayed home locked inside. Hours passed with no word. I paced the house, worried about Sophia despite everything. She was innocent in all this. Finally, at 3 a.m. they returned. Sophia was stable, but needed round-the-clock monitoring. Guess who got that job? I moved a cot into Sophia's room. Every 2 hours, I checked her breathing and administered medicine. Sleep became impossible. During the day I still had school and chores. At night I was a nurse. Dark circles formed under my eyes. Teachers started noticing. Miss KD from English asked if everything was okay. I just nodded, too tired to speak. She frowned but didn't push. In PE I could barely run a lap. The coach sent me to the nurse who took my temperature and found nothing wrong because physically nothing was wrong. Peter's business was booming. He bragged about a new investment deal over dinner while I served them. More money meant more charity events, more poker nights, more opportunities to parade me around. He bought Jess expensive jewelry and himself a new car. For me, nothing changed except the workload increased. One evening, while cleaning Peter's office, I noticed papers on his desk. Bank statements showing massive deposits, business contracts with signatures I didn't recognize, and underneath, a folder with my parents' names. I reached for it, desperate for information. The door slammed open. Peter stood there, face twisted with rage. He grabbed my hair, yanking me away from the desk. My scalp burned as he dragged me to the closet. This time he zip-tied my wrist to the clothing rod. My arms screamed from the position. Jess appeared with scissors. For a terrifying moment I thought she'd hurt me. Instead she cut my hair. Long chunks fell to the floor as she hacked randomly. When finished, my head looked like a badly mowed lawn. They left me tied there overnight. In the morning, Peter cut the zip ties. My arms were numb, shoulders on fire. He handed me a baseball cap to hide my butchered hair. At school, I kept it on despite teachers' protests. Better to break dress code than reveal what happened. The isolation was crushing. Other kids whispered about my weird behavior. Teachers stopped trying to engage me. I became a ghost walking the halls. Present but not really there. Even my favorite subjects lost meaning. What was the point of learning when my future was trapped in that house? Peter's poker friends grew bolder. During one game, a man followed me to the kitchen. He cornered me against the counter, pressing close. I could smell alcohol and cigars on his breath. His hand touched my face while I froze, terrified. Peter appeared in the doorway. Instead of helping, he told me to hurry up with the drinks. That night, I lay in Sophia's room, listening to her labored breathing. The nebulizer hummed steadily. Cameras watched from every angle. My parents sat in jail for crimes they didn't commit, and I was trapped completely alone. But something inside me refused to break. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the memory of my real parents' love. Maybe it was pure spite. Whatever it was, it whispered that this wasn't the end. Peter and Jess thought they'd won. They thought the cameras and locks and rules would keep me forever. They were wrong. I just had to be smart. I had to wait. I had to find their weakness because everyone had one. Even monsters who smiled at charity events while torturing children at home. Even people with police chief friends and expensive lawyers. The next morning brought more of the same routine. But now I paid attention differently. I memorized Peter's schedule, noting when he left for meetings. I studied Jess's habits, learning her patterns. I watched how they interacted with Sophia, seeing the cracks in their perfect parent facade. Most importantly, I listened. During their hushed conversations, I caught fragments about money troubles. Despite Peter's bragging, Jess complained about debts. Peter mentioned keeping investors happy. They argued about mortgage payments after they thought I was asleep. The cameras had blind spots, tiny areas where angles didn't quite overlap. I mapped them mentally while cleaning. The space behind the kitchen door, the corner of the laundry room. Small spaces, but spaces nonetheless. At school I noticed things too. The janitor's closet with no lock. The nurse's office computer left logged in during lunch. The library's old phone hidden behind reference books. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand but collected anyway. Peter announced a business trip for the following month. A week in Chicago meeting investors. Jess would stay home with us. My pulse quickened at this news. One less captor meant opportunities. I just had to survive until then. The days blurred together. Wake, cook, school, Sophia, clean, sleep, repeat. My body moved automatically while my mind planned. Every insult, every grab, every humiliation added fuel to my determination. They wanted to break me. Instead, they were forging something harder. 2 weeks passed before Peter's Chicago trip materialized. During that time, I perfected my understanding of the camera angles. While scrubbing the kitchen floor, I discovered the blind spot behind the pantry door extended further than I thought. Testing carefully, I found I could stand there for 30 seconds before needing to move back into view. Peter grew increasingly paranoid. He installed motion sensors in the hallways that beeped softly when triggered. The windows now had alarms that shrieked if opened more than 3 inches. He even put locks on the kitchen drawers containing knives. One morning, while preparing breakfast, I overheard Peter on a business call. His voice carried tension as he assured someone about meeting deadlines. He mentioned needing to secure additional funding. When he hung up, he noticed me at the stove and his eyes narrowed. He grabbed my wrist and twisted until I winced, then released me without a word. School offered brief respite. Miss KD continued watching me with concern. During English class, she assigned personal essays about overcoming challenges. While others wrote, she knelt beside my desk and placed a small card there. It had the school counselor's direct number. She walked away before I could react. I tucked the card into my shoe, heart pounding. At lunch, I considered using the library's hidden phone, But Peter had started calling the school randomly, asking to speak with me. The secretary would page me to the office where I'd have to talk to him on speaker while she listened. He always asked specific questions about my exact location. That afternoon, Sophia's breathing worsened. Her treatments weren't helping much. I adjusted the nebulizer mask on her small face while she wheezed. Despite everything, I'd grown protective of her. She was just a pawn in her parents' sick game. Jess noticed my gentleness with Sophia and scowled. She yanked the mask away and reapplied it roughly, making Sophia cry. Then she turned to me with cold eyes and informed me I was getting too comfortable. New rules would start tomorrow. The new rules were brutal. No sitting during the day except for meals. No drinking water without permission. No using the bathroom more than 3 times daily. I had to log every minute of my activities in a notebook they reviewed each night. Peter's poker night arrived with 8 men instead of the usual 4. They were louder, drunker. One man kept trying to pull me onto his lap while I served drinks. When I resisted, he grabbed my thigh hard enough to leave marks. Peter laughed and told me to be friendlier to his guests. After they left, I found cash tucked into my skirt pocket. My skin crawled as I realized what they thought I was. I threw the money in the trash, but Peter saw. He retrieved it and pocketed it himself, smirking about me, learning to be grateful. The next morning, I discovered they'd removed my bedroom door. Privacy was a privilege I hadn't earned, Jess explained. Now the cameras could monitor me constantly, even while sleeping. I started changing clothes in the shower, the only place with a curtain. At school, I finally worked up the courage to approach the counselor's office during lunch. But when I reached the door, Peter was inside talking to her. Through the window, I saw him showing her documents, probably the thick folder from his desk. The counselor nodded sympathetically at whatever lies he was spinning. He emerged and spotted me immediately. His smile was razor-sharp as he gripped my shoulder and steered me outside. In the car, he explained he'd been updating the school about my behavioral issues and pathological lying. No one would believe anything I said now. That evening, while cleaning the living room, I noticed something odd. A business card had fallen behind the couch. McGinney Investigations, Private Investigator. My pulse raced. Why would Peter need a private investigator? I memorized the number before placing the card back where I'd found it. Later, while serving dinner, I heard Peter mention something about background checks and custody documentation. Jess reminded him to be careful about paper trails. Sophia's condition deteriorated that week. Her asthma attacks came more frequently, each one scarier than the last. I begged Jess to take her to a specialist, but she accused me of questioning her parenting. As punishment, she made me stand in the corner for 2 hours after Sophia's treatments. During one particularly bad attack, I made an executive decision. While Jess was showering, I gave Sophia a second dose of her rescue inhaler. It helped immediately. Her breathing eased and color returned to her face. But Jess noticed the inhaler had been used. When she checked later, she flew into a rage, accusing me of trying to hurt Sophia. She called Peter home from work. Together, they decided I couldn't be trusted with medications anymore. They moved all of Sophia's treatments to their bedroom, leaving me to comfort her during attacks without any way to help. The investigation card haunted me. During a charity luncheon, I excused myself to the bathroom and found a payphone in the hotel lobby. My hand shook as I dialed the number. A woman answered professionally. I whispered quickly, explaining I'd found her card and asking if she was investigating Peter and Jess. She paused, then asked who I was. When I said I was their foster child, she asked for my name. Before I could answer, I heard Peter's voice in the hallway. I hung up and rushed back to the bathroom. Peter was waiting outside when I emerged. He studied my face carefully, then checked his watch. He'd timed my bathroom break. Without a word, he escorted me back to the luncheon, his hand tight on my elbow. That night they went through my things, every drawer dumped out, every pocket turned inside out. They found nothing because there was nothing to find, but they installed a lock on the bathroom door that only opened from the outside. Bathroom breaks now required permission and supervision. School became harder to navigate. Kids avoided me completely now. My unwashed hair under the baseball cap, my exhausted appearance, my inability to socialize. I looked like someone to stay away from. Even teachers kept their distance after Peter's visits. Only Miss KD persisted. She started leaving small gifts on my desk. A granola bar, a bottle of water, a pack of tissues. Never anything that could get me in trouble, just tiny kindnesses that reminded me someone noticed my suffering. One day she kept me after class. She spoke carefully about resources for students in difficult home situations. She mentioned that sometimes appearances weren't reality, that brave people sometimes had to make hard choices. She didn't say anything directly, but her eyes conveyed understanding. Peter's Chicago trip approached. He spent evenings preparing documents and making calls. I heard him arranging for someone named Ron to check on the house while he was gone. My heart sank. Even with Peter away, we'd still be watched. 3 days before the trip, everything changed. Sophia had her worst attack yet. Her lips turned blue as she gasped for air. Jess fumbled with the nebulizer while I stood helplessly in the doorway. Nothing was working. Jess finally called 911. Paramedics arrived and rushed Sophia to the hospital. In the chaos, they forgot about me. I was left alone in the house for the first time since my failed escape. But I couldn't leave. The cameras would record everything, and they'd return eventually. Instead, I used the time wisely. I searched Peter's office, careful to stay in camera blind spots. In his desk, I found the folder with my name. Inside were forged documents about my supposed behavioral problems, false medical records, even a psychiatric evaluation I'd never had. Deeper in the drawer, I found something worse. Photos of other kids, girls who looked like me all around my age. Some photos were old, dating back years. My stomach churned as I realized I wasn't their first foster child. I photographed everything with an old digital camera I found in the drawer, then put it all back exactly as I'd found it. The camera was ancient but functional. I hid it in the laundry room's blind spot, wrapped in old rags. Peter and Jess returned after midnight. Sophia was stable, but would stay hospitalized for observation. They were exhausted and angry, blaming me for not noticing her attack sooner. As punishment, they locked me in my room without dinner. Through the window, I watched Ron arrive the next morning. He was younger than Peter's usual friends, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes that didn't match the company he kept. Peter gave him a house tour, pointing out all the cameras and explaining the security system. When they reached my room, Peter introduced me as their troubled foster child who needed constant supervision. He warned Ron about my lying and manipulation. But when Peter turned away, Ron's expression shifted. He looked at my chopped hair, my thin frame, the locks on my windows, and something flickered in his eyes. Peter left for Chicago that afternoon. Jess followed him to the airport, leaving Ron to watch me. As soon as they were gone, he told me to go about my normal routine. But his voice was gentler than any adult had used in months. I started my chores, hyper-aware of his presence. He didn't hover like Peter or criticize like Jess. He sat in the living room reading, occasionally glancing up. When lunchtime came, he asked what I wanted to eat. The question was so unexpected I couldn't answer. He made sandwiches for both of us. As we ate in silence, he studied the cameras and security system. Then he asked very quietly how long I'd been here. When I told him, his jaw tightened. That evening, Jess called to check in. Ron assured her everything was fine. After hanging up, he told me to get some rest. But as I headed to my room, he said something that made me freeze. He mentioned that cameras sometimes malfunctioned, that technical glitches happened, that tomorrow's system maintenance might cause some temporary outages. I barely slept that night. Was he offering to help, or was this a test? Peter had fooled me before with fake kindness, but something about Ron felt different. Maybe it was the way he'd flinched when he saw my living conditions. The next morning, Ron announced he needed to check the security system. He went to the basement where the main controls were. 20 minutes later, several cameras went dark. He came upstairs looking frustrated, muttering about technical difficulties. For the first time in months, I could move freely in parts of the house. I retrieved the hidden camera from the laundry room and downloaded the photos onto an old USB drive I found. Then I hid both in a new spot inside an old detergent box in the garage. Ron spent the day trying to fix the cameras. He made a big show of calling tech support, leaving detailed voicemails about the malfunction, but I noticed he only worked on fixing the less important cameras, the ones in hallways and common areas. My bedroom and bathroom cameras stayed conveniently broken. That afternoon, he drove me to school. In the car, he asked about my real parents. I stayed silent, not trusting him yet. But he continued talking, mentioning that he'd recently discovered some things about Peter's business that concerned him. That good people sometimes got caught up with bad people. At school, Miss KD noticed something different about me. Maybe it was hope creeping back into my eyes. During English, she announced a special guest speaker next week, someone from a youth advocacy organization. She looked directly at me when she said they helped kids in difficult situations. After school, Ron was waiting. On the drive home, he mentioned that Jess had called. She was staying at the hospital with Sophia another night. We'd be alone again. He said it casually, but I caught the significance. That evening, he ordered pizza. While we ate, he told me about himself. He was a law student working part-time for Peter's company to pay tuition. He thought it was legitimate until recently. Now he was trying to gather evidence before going to authorities. Real authorities, not Peter's connections. He asked if I'd noticed anything unusual in the house. I stayed quiet, still unsure. But when he mentioned finding troubling documents about other foster children, I knew he'd seen the photos too. We looked at each other with new understanding. The next day was Saturday. Ron took me to the grocery store, saying we needed supplies. In the cereal aisle, he handed me a burner phone. He told me to hide it well and only use it for emergencies. His number was already programmed in. Back home, he spent time repairing more cameras. By evening, half the system was down. He created detailed documentation about the technical failures, establishing a paper trail that would explain any gaps in surveillance. Jess called furiously about the camera situation. Ron apologized profusely, blaming outdated equipment and promising to have everything fixed by Monday. After hanging up, he told me Peter was extending his Chicago trip by 2 days. We had time. That night, I showed him where I'd hidden the camera and USB drive. His face went pale as he scrolled through the evidence. The forged documents were bad enough, but the photos of other girls were damning. He told me to keep everything hidden for now. Sunday morning, Ron made pancakes. Over breakfast, he explained his plan. He'd been building a case file about Peter's fraudulent business practices. Combined with evidence of child abuse, it would be enough for federal authorities, people Peter couldn't buy or influence. But we needed more proof. He asked if I'd ever seen Peter's safe. I had, during my cleaning duties. It was in his bedroom closet. Ron said important documents were likely there, but we couldn't break in without leaving evidence. Then I remembered something. Peter's birthday was next month, and Jess always complained he used the same passwords for everything. Their anniversary date. I'd heard her mention it during one of their arguments about security. Ron's eyes lit up. That night, after confirming Jess would stay at the hospital again, we made our move. The bedroom camera was one he'd fixed, but he created a loop of empty footage to cover us. My hands shook as I entered the anniversary date. The safe clicked open. Inside were financial records, property deeds, and a folder that made my heart stop. Adoption papers, not for me, but for 3 other girls over the past decade, all listed as relocated to family out of state. But the photos in Peter's desk suggested different outcomes. Ron photographed everything with professional efficiency. He also found records of payments to various officials, including judges and social workers. The corruption ran deeper than we'd imagined. He told me to go to bed while he organized the evidence. Monday arrived too fast. Jess returned exhausted from the hospital. Sophia was better but still hospitalized. Ron gave his report about the cameras, promising full repairs within days. Jess barely listened, too tired to care. Peter called that afternoon. His trip was successful. He'd secured major funding. He'd be home Wednesday with big plans. My window of opportunity was closing. Ron left that evening, but not before slipping me a note. Tuesday, be ready. I spent Monday night preparing. I packed nothing. It would be too suspicious. But I mentally said goodbye to the few things that mattered. The books Miss KD had given me, the small dignity I'd maintained despite everything. Tuesday morning started normally. Breakfast, chores, the usual routine. Jess left for the hospital around 10 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, Ron arrived unexpectedly, claiming Peter had asked him to check the cameras again. Jess had already left. As soon as her car disappeared, Ron moved fast. He grabbed the hidden evidence while I changed into regular clothes, jeans and a t-shirt I'd hidden. Not the ridiculous outfits they made me wear. He told me we had 1 hour before Jess would get suspicious. But as we prepared to leave, a car pulled into the driveway. My blood froze. It was Peter. Home 2 days early. Ron pushed me toward the back door. But Peter was already entering through the garage. We were trapped. Peter's voice boomed through the house, calling for me. Ron told me to hide while he handled it. I crouched in the pantry's blind spot, heart hammering. I heard Peter asking why Ron was there. Ron smoothly lied about camera repairs. Then Peter noticed something. Maybe Ron's tension or some small detail out of place. His voice changed, becoming suspicious. He started walking through the house, checking rooms, getting closer to my hiding spot. Ron tried distracting him, but Peter wasn't listening anymore. He demanded to know where I was. When Ron claimed I was at school, Peter laughed coldly. He knew the school schedule better than anyone. Footsteps approached the kitchen. I pressed myself deeper into the corner, barely breathing. Peter entered, scanning the room. His eyes swept past my hiding spot once, twice, then they stopped. He'd noticed something, maybe a shadow or a reflection. Time slowed as he walked toward me. Ron followed, still trying to deflect, but Peter wasn't listening anymore. He reached for the pantry door. My mind raced through options, finding none. Then Sophia saved me. Jess called Peter's phone, hysterical. Sophia had taken a turn for the worse. They needed him at the hospital immediately. Real panic entered Peter's voice as he answered. Whatever his faults, he did care about his daughter. He rushed out, ordering Ron to find me and keep me locked up until he returned. The moment his car left, Ron pulled me from the pantry. We had minutes, maybe less. Jess would realize she hadn't seen me all morning. She'd ask questions. We ran to Ron's car. As we pulled away, I saw the house that had been my prison growing smaller in the rear window. But I knew this wasn't over. Peter would discover our escape within hours. He had connections everywhere. We needed to reach Ron's contact at the FBI before Peter could mobilize his network. The drive felt endless. Ron made calls while driving, speaking urgently to someone named Jenny at the federal building. She was expecting us. She'd already reviewed the preliminary evidence Ron had sent, but we needed to arrive safely with the physical proof. 20 minutes from downtown, Ron's phone rang. Peter. Ron let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Then my burner phone, the one hidden in my pocket, started buzzing. Somehow Peter knew the number. Ron told me to turn it off. We were close now, just a few more miles. But at a red light, I glimpsed a familiar car 2 lanes over. One of Peter's poker friends, the one who'd grabbed me. He was on his phone scanning traffic. Ron noticed too. He turned sharply, taking a different route. The poker friend's car tried to follow, but got caught at the light. We had moments before others would converge on our location. Peter's network was already hunting us. 3 blocks from the federal building, we hit gridlock traffic. Construction had narrowed the street to 1 lane. Cars crawled forward at walking pace. In the mirrors, I spotted 2 more familiar vehicles approaching from different directions. Ron grabbed the evidence bag in my hand. "Run!" he shouted. We abandoned the car and ran. The federal building's glass doors gleamed ahead, so close but still too far. Behind us, car doors slammed. Footsteps pounded pavement. We burst through the building's entrance just as Peter's men reached the steps. Security guards stepped forward, blocking their pursuit. Ron flashed his contact's name, and we were quickly escorted to elevators. On the 7th floor, Agent Jenny Povich waited in a conference room. She was the private investigator whose card I'd found, but she was actually an undercover federal agent who'd been building a case against Peter for years. Our evidence was the final piece she needed. As I gave my statement, surrounded by agents who actually listened and believed me, I thought about the other girls in those photos, about Sophia, innocent and sick, with parents who saw her as a prop, about my real parents sitting in jail for crimes they didn't commit. But mostly, I thought about Peter and Jess racing back from the hospital, only to find their house of cards beginning to collapse. They'd thought their money and connections made them untouchable. They'd thought a 12-year-old girl could never escape their web. They thought wrong. Agent Jenny Povich's office felt surreal after months of surveillance cameras. I sat in a regular chair, no locks on the doors, no one timing my bathroom breaks. Jenny spread the evidence across her desk while two other agents took notes. They asked detailed questions about dates, times, specific incidents. I answered everything, my voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on my bones. The photos of other girls made Jenny's expression harden. She exchanged glances with her colleagues before stepping out to make calls. Through the glass door, I watched her pace while talking, her gestures becoming more animated. Ron sat beside me, reviewing financial documents with another agent. His law school training showed as he explained Peter's money laundering schemes. An hour passed then too. Jenny returned with a team of investigators who'd been working Peter's case for years. They had pieces, suspicious business dealings, complaints that mysteriously disappeared, foster children who'd vanished from records. Our evidence connected everything. The adoption papers for girls who'd supposedly moved out of state, the payments to officials, the systematic abuse hidden behind charity galas. Jenny explained they'd move fast. Peter's connections ran deep, but federal authority trumped local corruption. They'd coordinate raids on his properties, freeze his accounts, arrest him before he could destroy evidence or flee. But first they needed me somewhere safe. Peter would realize I'd escaped soon. His network would search everywhere. A safe house was mentioned. I shook my head. No more locked houses, no more strangers controlling my life. Jenny understood. She made more calls, exploring options. Meanwhile, news arrived from the hospital. Jess had noticed my absence and called Peter repeatedly. His phone was off. He was probably racing home to check the cameras. Ron suggested his apartment temporarily. Jenny vetoed it immediately. Peter knew Ron worked for him. It would be the first place they'd check. We needed somewhere Peter would never think to look, with people who had no connection to him. Then Jenny asked about my original foster parents. My heart clenched. They were in jail, framed by Peter's forged evidence. Jenny's eyes sharpened. She pulled up their case file on her computer. The arrest had happened fast, too fast. The evidence was suspicious, too convenient. She made more calls. Within an hour, federal attorneys were reviewing my parents' case. The timeline didn't add up. The supposed victims couldn't be found. The evidence had appeared suddenly after my parents tried to regain custody. Jenny's team had seen this pattern before with Peter's other victims. My burner phone buzzed. Ron had turned it back on to monitor Peter's attempts to reach me. 17 missed calls. The voicemails progressed from angry to threatening to desperately bargaining. In the last one, Peter's voice cracked as he promised anything if I just came home. He knew his empire was crumbling. Jenny's phone rang. Federal marshals were at Peter's house. He wasn't there, but they'd secured the property. The cameras showed him arriving home an hour ago, discovering my escape, and leaving quickly with several bags. They'd found Jess at the hospital and arrested her. She'd screamed about her sick daughter, not understanding why handcuffs were necessary. Sophia, my chest tightened thinking about her. Jenny noticed my expression and assured me child services would ensure proper care. Real foster parents who'd passed actual background checks. Medical professionals who'd monitor her asthma correctly. No more being used as leverage. Another call came in. They'd traced Peter's car to a private airfield. He was trying to flee, but agents were already en route. His accounts were frozen, his credit cards flagged. The network he'd built over years was collapsing in hours. Ron finished with the financial crimes unit. He looked exhausted but satisfied. The evidence would put Peter away for decades on fraud alone. Combined with child abuse, trafficking, and corruption charges, he'd never hurt another kid. Jenny returned to the main issue. Where I'd stay tonight. Foster care was an option, but after everything the thought made me sick. She mentioned a youth shelter, but that felt wrong too. I needed something else, something that felt like choosing my own path. Then Miss Katie's name surfaced in my mind. My English teacher who'd noticed my suffering, who'd left me granola bars and tissues. Jenny made inquiries. Miss Katie had no connection to Peter's network. She'd actually filed several concerns about my well-being that had been mysteriously dismissed by the school administration. A call to Miss Katie revealed she'd been waiting by her phone, hoping for news. When Jenny explained the situation, Miss Katie immediately offered her spare room, just temporarily, until my parents' case was resolved. No locks, no cameras, no rules beyond basic respect. I could even join chess club. The federal building's garage had a secure exit. Ron walked me to an unmarked car where a female agent waited to drive me to Miss Katie's house. He handed me a card with his real contact information, promising to help however he could. His testimony would be crucial in court. The drive to Miss Katie's neighborhood felt like entering another world. Normal houses with normal families, kids playing in yards without fear, no security cameras on every corner. The agent parked outside a modest 2-story home with a garden full of roses. Miss Katie met us at the door. She looked exactly the same as in class, but somehow warmer. She showed me the spare room, simple but clean, with a lock on the inside. I could lock others out, not be locked in. The bathroom had a normal door, no cameras anywhere. Over tea, Miss Katie explained she'd suspected something was wrong for months. My exhaustion, my isolation, the way I'd flinched when anyone moved too quickly. She tried reporting it but kept hitting walls. Now she understood why Peter's network had reached even into the school system. That evening, while Miss Katie cooked dinner, Ginny called with updates. They'd caught Peter at the airfield. He tried to run but was tackled on the tarmac. During booking, he'd ranted about ungrateful foster kids and business rivals framing him. He still believed his money and connections would save him. The other girls in the photos were being investigated. Some had genuinely been relocated to relatives. Peter had kept those records to maintain his cover, but 3 were unaccounted for. Their cases had been closed mysteriously. Federal investigators were reopening everything. Miss Katie served spaghetti with garlic bread. We ate at her kitchen table like normal people. No standing to serve others. No criticism about portion sizes. She asked about my favorite subjects, my interests beyond survival. I'd almost forgotten I used to love science. After dinner, she showed me her home library. Hundreds of books lined the walls. She said I could read anything I wanted. No restrictions on learning. No punishment for curiosity. I pulled out a book about astronomy and held it like treasure. That night, lying in a bed I'd chosen to be in, I stared at the ceiling without cameras staring back. Through the window, stars were visible, something I hadn't seen in months from Peter's light-polluted neighborhood. My body stayed tense, waiting for alarms or footsteps or locks clicking. But only crickets chirped outside. Morning came gently. No shrieking alarm. At 5 a.m. Miss Katie knocked softly, asking if I wanted breakfast. I could say no. I could choose. But I joined her for eggs and toast, marveling at eating food I hadn't been forced to cook. Ginny arrived with news about my parents. Federal attorneys had filed emergency motions. The evidence against them was clearly fabricated. The judge, not one of Peter's connections, was appalled at the miscarriage of justice. Release papers were being processed. But bureaucracy moved slowly, even in emergencies. It would take days, maybe a week. Ginny assured me they were safe in protective custody now, away from the general population. They knew I was safe too. The reunion would come soon. School felt different knowing Peter couldn't monitor me. Kids still avoided me. My reputation as the weird girl would take time to change. But I sat with other students at lunch instead of hiding in the library. One girl asked about my hair, now growing out unevenly. I said I was thinking of cutting it properly short, choosing my own style. Chess club met that afternoon. I dreamed of joining for months. The teacher welcomed me warmly, not caring that I was starting mid-semester. I lost every game but didn't care. I was learning something because I wanted to, not because someone forced me. Miss KD picked me up after school like a normal guardian. We stopped at the grocery store where I helped choose dinner ingredients. She asked my preferences, treating me like my opinions mattered. I picked spaghetti sauce without mushrooms because I didn't like them, and that was okay. That evening, Jenny called with a breakthrough. One of the unaccounted girls had been found. She was living under a different name 2 states away, placed with a family who'd paid Peter for an illegal private adoption. She was safe but had no idea her placement was illegal. Authorities were handling it delicately. Days passed with strange normalcy. Wake up when my body was ready. Eat meals at a table with someone who cared about my thoughts. Attend school without fear of interrogation. Do homework because education mattered, not as punishment. Read books until my eyes grew heavy. Sleep in safety. Peter's network crumbled piece by piece. The police chief who dismissed my escape attempt was arrested. Several social workers faced charges. The judge who'd signed my parents' arrest warrant was under investigation. Each arrest revealed more corruption, like pulling a thread and finding endless routes. Ron testified to a grand jury about Peter's business practices. His detailed records and recorded conversations provided a roadmap of financial crimes. He'd risked everything to help me, potentially destroying his own career, but he said seeing those photos of missing girls made the choice clear. A week after my escape, Jenny brought the news I'd waited for. My parents were being released that afternoon. All charges dropped with prejudice. They could never be refiled. The state was preparing a massive lawsuit against everyone involved in their false imprisonment. The drive to meet them felt endless and instant simultaneously. Jenny explained they'd been moved to a hotel near the federal building for processing. They knew I was coming. They'd counted every day, never believing the charges, but unable to fight from behind bars. The hotel lobby was generic and perfect. No surveillance beyond normal security. No Peter, no Jess, no locked doors, just a normal place where normal reunions could happen. Jenny led me to a conference room and opened the door. They looked older, thinner. My dad's hair had gray streaks that weren't there before. My mom's hand shook as she stood, but their eyes were the same. Full of love that no false accusation could destroy. The hug lasted forever and not long enough. We cried until we couldn't anymore, then cried again. They whispered apologies for not protecting me, for being trapped when I needed them. I whispered back that it wasn't their fault, that I never believed the lies. Jenny gave us privacy to reconnect. My parents explained their side. The sudden arrest, the planted evidence, the lawyer who'd seemed helpful but was probably paid by Peter. They tried everything to reach me but hit walls everywhere. The system had been rigged against them from the start. I told them about the cameras, the poker nights, the closet punishments. My dad's fists clenched with each detail. My mom pulled me closer. They blamed themselves for not seeing Peter's manipulation sooner, for trusting social workers who'd seemed legitimate. Hours passed in that conference room. Jenny returned with documents. Temporary custody papers, returning me to my parents immediately. Foster care would monitor for a few months as procedure. But I was going home, my real home. Miss KD had packed my few belongings. She hugged me goodbye, promising I could visit anytime. She'd remain part of my life by choice, not obligation. The astronomy book was tucked in my bag. A gift, she said, for the journey ahead. The apartment my parents had moved to after their release was smaller than our old house. Peter's machinations had cost them jobs, savings, reputation, but it had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen table for 3, and no cameras. It was perfect. That first night home we ordered Chinese takeout, and ate straight from containers. My parents kept touching my shoulder, my hand, making sure I was real. I did the same, barely believing this wasn't another dream that would shatter. My old room was gone, but my parents had saved what they could in storage. Photos of better times, my favorite books, the blanket I'd been wrapped in as a baby when they'd found me. We spent the evening reconstructing my space with familiar treasures. School transfer papers were filed the next day. A fresh start at a public school near our new apartment. No Peter paying principals to isolate me. No Jess calling with fake concerns. Just normal teenage challenges I'd face on my own terms. The legal proceedings would continue for years. Trials, testimonies, appeals. Peter faced federal charges that would keep him locked up for decades. Jess got less time but still significant. Their assets were seized, with funds going to victims' restitution. Sophia was placed with a family experienced in medical needs. Her asthma improved with proper care and attention. I thought about her sometimes, hoping she'd forget the chaos of her early years. She deserved better than parents who'd used her as a tool. The other missing girls' cases progressed slowly. 2 were found alive, trafficked through Peter's network, but surviving. 1 remained missing, her fate unknown. Their families finally had answers, even if some answers brought only grief. My parents found new jobs eventually. Lesser positions than before, but honest work. We rebuilt slowly, trust, stability, normalcy. Some nights I still woke expecting cameras, but my dad snoring through thin walls reminded me I was safe. Therapy helped process the trauma. Not court-ordered sessions with Peter's planted professionals, but real help chosen freely. Some days were harder than others. Healing wasn't linear, but each day I chose my own clothes, my own meals, my own activities was a victory. Ron stayed in touch. He'd switched law schools to distance himself from Peter's influence, but kept his focus on justice. He promised that when he passed the bar, he'd help other kids trapped in corrupt systems. Our experience had changed his career path entirely. Miss KD invited us for dinner monthly. She and my parents became friends, bonded by caring for me in different ways. She recommended books that helped me catch up academically. Chess club at the new school welcomed me warmly. Jenny checked in periodically. The investigation had expanded beyond Peter to similar networks. Our evidence had opened doors to saving other children. She couldn't share details, but her satisfaction suggested significant progress. 1 year later, life felt almost normal. I was 13 in 8th grade, worried about algebra tests and friend drama. Regular teenage concerns that felt like luxuries. My parents still sometimes watched me with wonder, amazed I'd survived and returned to them. Peter's sentencing made small news in local papers. Life without parole for the worst charges. His empire had dissolved completely, his name becoming synonymous with corruption and foster care. He'd lost everything trying to control children who'd never belonged to him. I didn't attend the sentencing. That chapter was closed. My life moved forward. High school applications, science fair projects, sleepovers with new friends who knew nothing about my past. Each normal day was a choice and a gift. The blanket I'd been wrapped in as a baby sat folded on my dresser, a reminder that my story began with teenage parents who'd chosen love over convenience, who'd fought to keep me then and fought to get me back, who'd never stopped believing we'd be reunited. Some nights I dreamed about cameras and locked doors, but I woke to freedom, to parents making breakfast, to homework waiting and friends texting, to a life that was mine to live, finally and completely. The girl who'd survived Peter's house had become just a teenager facing algebra and acne and first crushes. That was the real victory. Not the dramatic arrests or federal investigations. Just waking up each morning in a home where love meant protection, not control. Where doors locked from the inside. Where I could choose to read until dawn or sleep past noon on weekends. My parents never asked me to be grateful for normal life. They knew I'd earned it through months of hell. But I felt grateful anyway. For teachers who noticed, for Ron's conscience, for Jenny's determination, for parents who'd never stopped fighting. The astronomy book from Miss KD became my favorite. I'd lie on our apartment's roof, finding constellations, remembering when stars were invisible behind Peter's cameras. Now they spread endless above me, each one a choice I could make freely. Life wasn't perfect. Money stayed tight. Nightmares lingered. Trust came slowly. But imperfect freedom beat perfect captivity. Each small choice, what to wear, what to eat, when to sleep, reminded me that Peter had lost and I had won. My story became one of many in Jenny's files. Evidence of systematic abuse hidden behind charity galas. Proof that money couldn't buy children's lives. A reminder that sometimes, 12-year-olds could bring down empires built on others' suffering. But mostly my story became ordinary. A teenager doing homework, arguing about curfew, planning for high school, living the life Peter had tried to steal. Choosing my own path each day, one free decision at a time.